The scent of lilies was the first thing I noticed each morning, a sweet, heavy perfume that meant everything was in its place. Today, it was especially important. Sunlight streamed through the bay window of the dining room, catching on the polished surface of the mahogany table. I adjusted the placement of a single porcelain vase, turning it just so until the light bloomed within the crystal-clear water. Every detail was a word in a sentence I had been composing for 25 years, a sentence that read, "I have built a good life, a beautiful life, for him." My sister Sarah appeared in the doorway, a dish towel slung over her shoulder, a soft smile on her face. She saw me, as she always did, fussing. "Evie, it is perfect. Stop fretting. Marcus is not a food critic." "It is Mother's Day," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "It should be special." Sarah came and stood beside me, her presence a familiar comfort. She looked at the table, at the silver cutlery gleaming beside the bone china plates, the tiny quiches waiting to be warmed, the bowl of fresh berries that cost a small fortune this early in the season. Her gaze was not critical but knowing. "He knows, Evie. He knows what you did for him. You do not have to prove it with every brunch." I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. The tension in my shoulders eased a fraction. It is not about proving. It is about continuity, tradition. He should have a home to come back to that feels like a sanctuary. My eyes drifted to the large portrait above the mantelpiece, a photograph of Marcus at his college graduation, his smile bright, his future a wide-open road. My greatest accomplishment. My only truly necessary accomplishment. Sarah followed my gaze. "Remember when he was 10, and he tried to make you breakfast in bed for Mother's Day? He burned the toast so badly we had to open all the windows." A genuine laugh escaped me, the memory a warm balm. "And the orange juice had so much pulp it was practically a smoothie. He was so proud." The image was vivid in my mind. My small boy, bearing a tray twice his size, his face smudged with flour, beaming with a love so pure it made my heart ache even now. I would give anything to have that little boy back for just 5 minutes. "You sacrificed everything for those 5 minutes," Sarah said softly, her voice laced with a shared understanding of the years that had passed. "The double shifts at the hospital, the nights you went without so he could have new soccer cleats. You built this." She gestured around the room, at the house that was more than a house. It was a monument to survival. From nothing. He knows that. "I hope he does," I whispered, more to myself than to her. The fear was a quiet, constant hum under the surface of my pride. The fear that he would forget the struggle, that the polished man he had become would look back on the woman I was then, the tired, stretched-thin single mother, with pity or, worse, embarrassment. I needed him to remember the strength it took, not just the struggle. The doorbell chimed, a melodious ring that sent a jolt through my entire body. "He is here." I smoothed the front of my silk blouse, a nervous habit. Sarah gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before heading to the kitchen to put the final touches on the food. I walked to the door, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor, a sound that belied the frantic beating of my heart. I took a deep breath, arranged my face into what I hoped was a warm, relaxed smile, and opened the door. And there he was, my Marcus. His smile was the same as the boy in the photograph, just housed in the face of a man. "Happy Mother's Day, Mom." He stepped forward and enveloped me in a hug. I closed my eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne, feeling the solid strength of him. For a moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The world was perfectly aligned. Then my gaze shifted to the woman standing just behind him. Chloe. Her smile was a careful construction, a movement of muscles that did not quite reach her eyes. She was beautiful, there was no denying that, with her sharp cheekbones and expensively cut blonde hair. But her beauty felt like a weapon, something she wielded. "Evelyn," she said, her voice cool and measured, "what a charming door knocker." She did not step forward for a hug, she never did. "Thank you, Chloe, please come in." I stepped aside and they entered my sanctuary. The tour began, as it always did. Marcus walked with his arm around me, pointing out little things he remembered. "I cannot believe you still have this vase, Mom. I remember when I broke the old one and we glued it back together." Chloe lagged slightly behind, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She stopped by a new abstract painting I had saved for months to buy. It was a splash of vibrant color against the neutral wall. "Interesting," she said, tilting her head. "It is very bold. I would have chosen something more subdued for this lighting. The colors are fighting with the rug, do you not think, Marcus? Marcus's arm tightened almost imperceptibly around my shoulders. He did not look at the painting. I think it looks great, Mom. Really brightens up the place. We moved into the dining room. Chloe's gaze swept over the table I had labored over for hours. She reached out and lightly touched the edge of a plate. Lennox chirp, she stated, as if naming a species of bird. A classic. It is a shame they discontinued the full-service set. Mixing and matching patterns can look so haphazard. I felt a hot prickling at the back of my neck. It is not mixed, it is a complete set. Oh, of course, she said, her smile never wavering. My mistake. It is just that the gold trim on this charger seems a slightly different hue than the gold on the plate. It is probably just the light. She looked directly at me, and in that look I saw it. A challenge, a deliberate undermining. Marcus was silent. He pulled out a chair for Chloe, then one for me, his movements stiff. The silence that descended was heavy, thick with everything that was not being said. Sarah emerged from the kitchen with a platter of eggs Benedict, the hollandaise sauce a perfect, creamy yellow. Dig in, everyone. Happy Mother's Day. We began to eat, or rather, Sarah and I began to eat. Marcus picked at his food. Chloe took a small, precise bite of her eggs and nodded slowly. The eggs are poached beautifully, Sarah. A perfect consistency. It is so difficult to get the whites set without overcooking the yolk. The hollandaise, however, is that a hint of lemon. I find a more traditional, butter-forward approach is less assertive. Sarah, ever the diplomat, simply smiled. I like a little citrus to cut the richness. I could not stay silent any longer. The criticism was a slow, dripping poison. I think it is perfect, just the way we have always had it. Chloe's eyes met mine again. Tradition is so important, is it not? It is just that sometimes, traditions can benefit from a little updating. Do you not agree, Marcus? All eyes turned to my son. He looked down at his plate, pushing a piece of Canadian bacon around with his fork. The weight of the moment pressed down on the table. He was being asked to choose, not between eggs Benedict and criticism, but between his past and his present, between his mother and his wife. He cleared his throat, a small, nervous sound. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, a flash of apology in his eyes. Then he looked at Chloe, and his expression shifted, hardened into a mask of neutrality. It is fine, Chloe, he said, his voice low and flat. It is all fine. The word hung in the air. Fine asterisk. It was the most devastating word he could have chosen. It was not a defense of me, nor was it an agreement with her. It was a dismissal. A white flag waved over the battlefield of our family history, reducing my carefully prepared brunch, my cherished traditions, my entire life's work, to something that was merely asterisk fine asterisk. I looked down at my own plate. The perfect eggs, the glossy sauce, the finely chopped chives, it all suddenly looked staged and foolish. The foundation I had spent a lifetime building felt less solid than it had just an hour ago. The meal continued in a strained quiet, the clinking of cutlery against china the only sound. I knew then that the fault lines had always been there, running deep beneath the polished surface of my life. And I knew, with a cold, sinking certainty, that this was only the beginning. The tremors were just starting. The clinking of silverware against fine china was the only sound that felt real to me. Everything else in that sun-drenched brunch spot was a stage prop, a beautiful lie. The light streamed through the large windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air, and it felt cruel that the world could be so bright when a storm was brewing inside me. I had chosen this table specifically, the one by the window with the view of the little courtyard garden, because I remembered it was where we celebrated Marcus's high school graduation. A lifetime ago, a different son. Marcus sat across from me, a handsome stranger in my son's chair. He had his father's jawline, but his eyes, when they briefly met mine, were shadowed with something I could not name. And then there was Chloe, perched beside him like a jeweled bird of prey, her hand permanently affixed to his arm, a claim staked in flesh and bone. Her smile was a perfect, polished thing, all teeth and no warmth. The avocado toast here is exceptional, she announced, as if delivering a state secret. It is all about the chili flakes. They source them from some tiny village in Morocco. You can just tell the difference. I took a slow sip of my water, the condensation cool against my trembling fingers. I had to steer this back to safe harbor. back to us. It reminds me of that little cafe we used to go to, Marcus, I began, my voice softer than I intended. The one with the blue awning, remember? After your soccer games, you would always order a mountain of French fries and drown them in ketchup. I offered a small smile, willing him to remember with me. Marcus opened his mouth, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but Chloe's laugh, a sharp, tinkling sound, cut through the memory before it could take root. Oh, Marcus would not be caught dead eating ketchup now, she said, patting his arm. I have him on a much cleaner diet. It is amazing how much better he feels. Is it not, darling? She did not wait for his answer. Which reminds me, we have finally decided on a venue for the wedding, the Clearwater Estate. It is exclusive, just perfect. We are thinking a very intimate guest list. 100 absolute maximum. My heart squeezed. 100. I had a mental list of at least 30 cousins and family friends alone. I tried to catch Marcus's eye, to silently ask if this was truly what he wanted, but he was looking at Chloe, a passive expression on his face. An intimate wedding can be lovely, I said carefully. But your father's side of the family is quite large, Marcus. Your Aunt Sarah would be heartbroken if... We are not really concerned with extended family, Chloe interrupted, her tone dismissive. This day is about us, about our future. We have to be ruthless with the list. It is the only way. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with a possessive light. And after the wedding, we are going to start looking for a house immediately. Something modern with a lot of light. No old, drafty houses full of someone else's memories. The words landed like a physical blow. Our home, the one I had shared with Marcus and his father, was full of light. It was full of our memories. To her, they were just someone else's clutter. The conversation continued like this, a tennis match where I was not allowed to hold a racket. Chloe served volley after volley of their plans, the minimalist wedding bands, the honeymoon in Bali, the decision to wait at least 5 years before even thinking about children. Each plan was a brick, meticulously laid to build a wall around my son, a wall I was clearly not meant to scale. With every word, Marcus seemed to shrink, to become less the man I raised and more an accessory to Chloe's vision. I felt the small, velvet box in my purse like a lead weight. It was my last hope, a tangible piece of my heart. It was my grandmother's pearl necklace, something old, something beautiful, something that had witnessed generations of love. I had imagined giving it to Chloe, telling her the story, welcoming her into the fold of our family history. Now it felt foolish, naive. But I had to try. As a pause finally settled over the table, the waiter clearing the dessert plates, I knew it was my moment. My hands were shaking as I reached into my bag. The velvet was soft against my skin. Chloe, I said, and my voice did not sound like my own. I know things are different now, and you have your own plans, but I wanted to give you this. It is a tradition in our family. I placed the box on the table between us. Chloe looked at it as if it were a foreign artifact, something potentially hazardous. She did not reach for it. It was my grandmother's, I continued, pushing the box slightly toward her. She wore it on her wedding day, and my mother wore it on hers. I wore it on mine. I always thought I would give it to Marcus's wife one day. It is a piece of us, a piece of our history. I opened the box. The pearls glowed with a soft, inner light, each one a perfect, milky sphere. They were elegant and timeless, everything I had hoped this brunch would be. Chloe stared at the necklace, her face a mask of cold appraisal. There was no warmth, no gratitude, not even curiosity. She looked from the pearls to me, and her eyes held a finality that made my blood run cold. Evelyn, she said, and her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. That is a very sweet gesture, but it is not really our style. Marcus and I are looking forward, not backward. She paused, letting the rejection hang in the air like a poison gas. Then she delivered the blow, the words so calculated, so brutal they stole the air from my lungs. I am the mother that matters now. You had your turn. The world stopped. The chatter of the other diners, the clatter from the kitchen, the sunlight streaming through the window, it all faded into a dull roar. I could only stare at her, my mouth slightly agape, trying to process the sheer cruelty of the statement. It was not just a rejection of the gift. It was an erasure of my entire life, my entire identity as a mother. And then the true devastation began. I turned my head slowly, my movements feeling thick and syrupy. I looked to my son, my Marcus, the little boy I had rocked to sleep, the teenager I had driven to 1,000 practices, the young man I had cheered on at college graduation. I looked into his eyes, my own pleading, begging him to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge that I still mattered, that our history was not just a turn that could be so callously ended. He saw my look. I know he saw it. For a second, his face was a battlefield of conflicting emotions: guilt, pain, fear. There was a painful, stretching silence that seemed to last an eternity. The entire restaurant was holding its breath with me. Then he looked away. He lowered his gaze to the tablecloth, to his own hands. He could not bear to look at me. "Chloe is right," he said, so quietly I almost did not hear it. The words were not loud, but they hit with the force of a sledgehammer, shattering the last fragile hope I had been clinging to. It is just not our vision. Validation. He had validated the betrayal. In that quiet, cowardly statement, he had chosen her. He had agreed that I was part of the past, a chapter to be closed. The world I had built, the love I had given, it all crumbled to dust in that instant. The foundation of my life gave way, and I was falling into a void I never knew existed. I do not know how long I sat there. I could not feel my body. I was aware of Chloe gathering her purse, of Marcus standing up, his movements stiff and awkward. I heard her say something about having to go, an appointment they could not miss. Their voices were muffled, as if I were underwater. I could not look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on the pearl necklace, still lying exposed and rejected in its velvet bed. A symbol of love that was now a monument to my failure. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Marcus's hand, a brief, hesitant touch. I did not flinch. I did not move. The touch was gone as quickly as it came. I heard their footsteps retreating, the door opening and closing with a soft chime. And then I was alone, truly alone. The sunlight felt cold. The laughter from the other tables sounded like mockery. I was a ghost at the feast of my own life. I reached out a single, trembling finger and touched one of the pearls. It was cool and smooth, a relic, just like me. And as I sat there in the devastating silence, a single, terrifying thought began to form in the ruins of my mind. If I am not his mother anymore, then who in God's name am I? The silence after the door clicked shut was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was a physical presence in the room, thick and heavy, pressing down on the remnants of the brunch. The half-eaten quiche, the wilting flowers, the 2 empty chairs, they were artifacts of a battle that had ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, devastating surrender. Sarah was looking at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and pity, but I could not bear it. I could not bear any of it. "I need a moment," I said, my voice strangely calm, a flat line in the emotional wreckage. I did not look at my mother, who was staring blankly at her folded napkin. I simply stood and walked away, each step measured and deliberate, as if the floor might crack open beneath me if I made a wrong move. My bedroom was a sanctuary that now felt like a tomb. I closed the door and leaned against it, the solid wood a feeble barrier against the truth. The confrontation replayed in my mind on a vicious loop. My mother's cold finality, my own desperate, clawing attempts to make her see, and Marcus, my brilliant, broken brother, choosing his prison of resentment over any possibility of us. The grief that washed over me was not sharp and stabbing like it had been in the dining room. It was a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. It was the grief of finality. My eyes fell on the photograph on my dresser. It was a relic from a different epoch, a sun-drenched day at the beach. Marcus, about 10, was grinning a gap-toothed grin, his arm thrown around my shoulders. I was maybe 7, squinting against the sun, clinging to his side as if he were my personal superhero. We were sticky with salt water and happy, truly, uncomplicatedly happy. I picked up the silver frame, my fingers tracing the glass over his young, hopeful face. That boy, the one who built sandcastles with me and promised to protect me from seagulls, was gone. He had been replaced by a stranger who looked at me with contempt. The love I felt for the boy in the picture was a tangible thing, a warm ember in my chest, but it was a love for a ghost. Holding that photo was like holding a shard of a beautiful, shattered vase. I could remember the whole, but I could only cut myself on the pieces that remained. This was the depth of my loss. It was not just the loss of a brother in the present. It was the loss of every shared memory, every inside joke, every dream of a future where we would navigate adulthood together. That future was a lie. With a resolve that felt like tearing off my own arm, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, a place for things I did not need to see every day. I placed the photograph inside, face down, and closed the drawer. The click of the latch was the sound of a door closing forever. The weeks that followed were a study in quiet reconstruction. I became a woman of routine and purpose. I rose early. I worked late, pouring all of my energy into my design business. I let the blueprints and fabric swatches and client meetings consume me. There were no more anxious text messages to Marcus, no more carefully worded emails to my mother. The silence from their side of the world was absolute, and I slowly learned to stop waiting for it to break. I filled my life with other sounds. The laughter of my friends, the empowering hum of my sewing machine, the satisfying click of my front door locking at night, a barrier I controlled. Sarah was my anchor. She did not push, she did not offer platitudes. She simply showed up with coffee and bad movies and a presence that said, "I am here and you are not alone." One evening, as we sat on my sofa, she finally put words to the transformation she saw. "You are different, Evelyn. It is like you have built a fortress around yourself." I looked out the window at the city lights. "It is not a fortress, Sarah. It is a foundation. I am building a life on my own terms. Their absence, it is not a hole anymore. It is just space. Space that I get to fill with whatever I choose." And I did choose. I chose happiness. It was not a constant state, but a conscious decision I made every morning. I rediscovered the joy of a solo Saturday morning at the art gallery, the pleasure of cooking an elaborate meal just for myself, the freedom of spending my money without a twinge of guilt that I was not sharing it. The rift was permanent. I had stopped trying to bridge it because I had finally accepted that I was on the right side all along. A year later, the sun streamed through the large windows of a bright, airy restaurant, illuminating a table vibrant with laughter and clinking glasses. It was Mother's Day. Sarah sat to my right, beaming, and around the table were three of my closest friends, women who had become my chosen family. The air was filled with the easy, comfortable chatter of people who genuinely love each other. Plates of exquisite food were passed around, and the champagne flowed like liquid gold. My eyes drifted to the empty seat at the round table. A year ago, that space would have been a gaping wound, a symbol of a family torn apart. Today, it was just an empty chair. It represented a choice, my choice for peace. My choice to celebrate the mothers at the table, Sarah, my wonderful friends, and to celebrate myself for mothering my own spirit back to health. The conversation ebbed and flowed, and a comfortable silence fell for a moment as we all took a breath between courses. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand, her smile saying everything. In that profound quiet, surrounded by love I had chosen and nurtured, I felt a surge of certainty so powerful it was almost dizzying. My turn was far from over. It was just beginning. The life I had built was strong and beautiful and entirely my own. But as I looked at Sarah's smiling face, a single, treacherous thought insinuated itself into my contentment, a cold whisper from the past I thought I had sealed away. If this piece was so complete, why did the memory of that closed drawer, and the boy trapped inside it, still have the power to make my heart ache with a longing that felt dangerously like hope? The empty chair was a choice, but choices, I was learning, could have shadows of their own.